Qulám Alíy-i-Najjár. This man, a carpenter and a master craftsman, came from Kashan. For faith and certitude he was like a sword drawn from the scabbard. He was well known in his own city as a man righteous, true, and worthy of trust. He was high-minded, abstemious, and chaste. When he became a believer, his urgent longing to meet Baha'u'llah could not be stilled. Full of joyous love, he went out of the land of Kashan, and traveled to Iraq, where he beheld the splendor of the rising sun. He was a patient man, mild, quiet, mostly keeping to himself. In Baghdad he worked at his craft, was in touch with the friends, and sustained by the presence of Baha'u'llah. From some time he lived in utter happiness and peace. Then those who had been taken prisoner were sent away to Mosul, and he was among the victims, and, like them, exposed to the wrath of the oppressors. He remained in captivity for quite a while, and when freed, came to Akka. Here, too, he was a friend to the prisoners, and in the fortress he continued to practice his skill. As usual, he was inclined to solitude, apt to stay apart from friend and stranger alike, and much of the time lived by himself. Then the supreme ordeal, the great desolation, came upon us. Qulám Alíy took on the carpentry work of the Holy Tomb, exerting all his sure powers. To this day, the glass roof which is over the inner courtyard of the shrine of Baha'u'llah remains as the product of his skill. He was a man crystal clear of heart. His face shone. His inner condition was constant. At no time was he changeable or unstable. He was staunch, loving, and true till his last breath. After some years in this neighborhood, he rose upward to the neighborhood of the all-embracing mercy of God, and became a friend to those who dwell in the high heavens. He had the honor of meeting Baha'u'llah in both worlds. This is the most precious bestowal, the costliest of all gifts. To him be salutations and praise. His bright grave is in Akka. Jináb-i-Muníb, upon him be the glory of the All-Glorious. His name was Mírzá, and he was spirit itself. He came from Kashan. In the days of the Bab he was drawn to the sweet savors of God. It was then he caught fire. He was a fine youth, handsome, full of charm and grace. He was a calligrapher second to none, a poet, and he had as well a remarkable singing voice. He was wise and perceptive, staunch in the faith of God, a flame of God's love, severed from all but God. During the years when Baha'u'llah resided in Iraq, Jináb-i-Muníb left Kashan and hastened to his presence. He went to live in a small and humble house, barely managed to subsist, and set about committing to writing the words of God. On his brow the bestowals of the manifestation were clear to see. In all his mortal world he had only one possession, his daughter, and even his daughter he had left behind in Persia as he hurried away to Iraq. At the time when, with all pomp and ceremony, Baha'u'llah and his retinue departed from Baghdad, Jináb-i-Muníb accompanied the party on foot. The young man had been known in Persia for his easy and agreeable life and his love of pleasure, also for being somewhat soft and delicate and used to having his own way. It is obvious what a person of this type endured, going on foot from Baghdad to Constantinople. Still he gladly measured out the desert miles, and he spent his days and nights chanting prayers, communing with God and calling upon him. He was a close companion of mine on that journey. There were nights when we would walk one to either side of the howdah of Baha'u'llah, and the joy we had defies description. Some of those nights he would sing poems. Among them he would chant the odes of Hafiz, like the one that begins, quote, "Come, let us scatter these roses, let us pour out this wine," unquote. That the remainder of the verse is, quote, "Let us split the roof of heaven and draw a new design," end of footnote. And that other, quote, To our king, though we bow the knee, we are kings of the morning star. No changeable colors have we, red lions, black dragons we are." Unquote. The Blessed Beauty, at the time of his departure from Constantinople, directed Jináb-i-Muníb to return to Persia and promulgate the faith. Accordingly, he went back, and over a considerable period he rendered outstanding services, especially in Tehran. When he came again from Persia to Adrianople and entered the presence of Baha'u'llah, enjoying the privilege of attending upon him, at the time of the greatest catastrophe, that is, the exile to Akka, he was made a prisoner on this pathway and traveled, by now feeble and ill, with the party of Baha'u'llah. He had been stricken by a severe ailment and was pitifully weak. Still, he would not agree to remaining behind in Adrianople, where he could receive treatment, because he wanted to sacrifice his life and fall at the feet of his Lord. We journeyed along till we reached the sea. He was now so feeble that it took 3 men to lift him and carry him onto the ship. Once he was on board, his condition grew so much worse that the captain insisted we put him off the ship, but because of our repeated pleas, he waited till we reached Smyrna. In Smyrna, the captain addressed Colonel Omar Bach, the government agent, who accompanied us, and told him, quote, "If you don't put him ashore, I will do it by force, because the ship will not accept passengers in this condition." Unquote. We were compelled then to take Jináb-i-Muníb to the hospital at Smyrna. Weak as he was, unable to utter a word, he dragged himself to Baha'u'llah, lay down at his feet, and wept. On the countenance of Baha'u'llah as well there was intense pain. We carried Jináb-i-Muníb to the hospital, but the functionaries allowed us not more than 1 hour's time. We laid him down on the bed. We laid his fair head on the pillow. We held him and kissed him many times. Then they forced us away. It is clear how we felt. Whenever I think of that moment, the tears come, my heart is heavy, and I summon up the remembrance of what he was. A great man, infinitely wise he was, steadfast, modest, and grave, and there was no one like him for faith and certitude. In him the inner and outer perfections, the spiritual and physical, were joined together. That is why he could receive endless bounty and grace. His grave is in Smyrna, but it is off by itself and deserted. Whenever this can be done, the friends must search for it, and that neglected dust must be changed into a much-frequented shrine, so that the pilgrims who visit there may breathe in the sweet scent of his last resting place. Mírzá Muṣṭafá Naráqí. Among that company of pure and goodly souls was Mírzá Muṣṭafá, a leading citizen of Naráq, and one of the earliest believers. His face shone with the love of God. His mind was concerned with the anemones of mystic meanings, fair as meadows and beds of flowers. It was in the days of the Bab that he first set his lips to the intoxicating cup of spiritual truth, and he had a strange tumult in his brain, a fierce yearning in his heart. In the path of God he threw down whatever he possessed. He gambled everything away, gave up his home, his kin, his physical well-being, his peace of mind. Like a fish on the sand, he struggled to reach the water of life. He came to Iraq, joined the friends of his soul, and entered the presence of Baha'u'llah. For some time he lived there, joyful and content, receiving endless bounty. Then he was sent back to Persia, where, to the utmost of his capacity, he served the faith. He was a whole and accomplished man, staunch, firmly rooted as the hills, sound and worthy of trust. To him, in all that turmoil and panic, the wild dogs howling were only buzzing flies. Tests and trials rested his mind. When cast into the fire of afflictions that broke out, he proved to be shining gold. On the day when the convoy of Baha'u'llah was leaving Constantinople from Adrianople, Mírzá Muṣṭafá arrived from Persia. There was no opportunity for him to reach Baha'u'llah except once, and he was thereupon directed to return to Persia. At such a moment he had the honor of being received. When Mírzá Muṣṭafá reached Azerbaijan, he began to spread the faith. Day and night he remained in a state of prayer, and there in Tabriz he drank of a brimming cup. His fervor increased, his teaching raised a tumult. Then the eminent scholar, the renowned Sheikh Ahmad-i-Khorasani, came to Azerbaijan, and the two of them joined forces. The result was such overwhelming spiritual fire that they taught the faith openly and publicly, and the people of Tabriz rose up in wrath. The Farashes hunted them down and caught Mírzá Muṣṭafá. But then the oppressors said Mírzá Muṣṭafá had too long locks of hair. This cannot be the right man. At once Mírzá Muṣṭafá took off his hat, and down fell the locks of hair. Behold, he told them, I am the one. They arrested him then. They tortured him and Sheikh Ahmad, until finally in Tabriz those two great men drained the cup of death and, martyred, hastened away to the supreme horizon. At the place where they were to be killed, Mírzá Muṣṭafá cried out, Kill me first, kill me before Sheikh Ahmad, that I might not see them shed his blood. Their greatness has been recorded for all times in the writings of Baha'u'llah. They received many a tablet from him, and after their death he set down with his exalted pen the anguish they endured. From youth till old age this illustrious man, Mírzá Muṣṭafá, devoted his entire life to service on the pathway of God. Today he dwells in the all-glorious realm, in the neighborhood of the ineffable mercy of God, and he rejoices with exceeding gladness, and he celebrates the praise of his Lord. Blessedness be his, and a goodly home. To him be tidings of great joy from the Lord of Lords. May God grant him an exalted station in that high company.